Hello guys, Alan here and welcome back to the channel. This video begins a new series which I call the concrete structures, and we are going to be looking at a lot of stuff in this series. Alright, so we are going to be talking about some concrete structures, and also you'll be looking at some rebar designs and how you can actually put all of those rebars modeling together inside of Revit. Alright, and we are going to be emphasizing on the concrete structures. Alright, so this series is going to be the series for you. If you're watching this video and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. It's going to help me out a lot. It's not going to cost you anything. Just make sure you hit on the subscribe button below this video down there. All right, so we are going to start off quickly, and we are going to start modeling off and designing our concrete structure. Then we are going to look at the rebars in the next part. All right, so just as I've learned from my mentor Balkan Architect, I'm actually going to teach you guys the same way he actually taught me, and I'm going to teach you guys some tricks and tips you can also use and do inside of the Revit software. So we are going to get started, and I'd want to make this video as shorter as I can. I don't want to make this video too long enough, because maybe some of you might not have the opportunity to watch the video to the very end. So I'm going to try and keep everything very simple and as fast as I can, so that we can just cover everything we have to cover in this part in just some few minutes. All right, so I'm going to get started, and first of all, what we need to get started is we need the right template to get started. All right, so now when you head into the models inside of this section right here and you click on new in there, you're going to have a pop-up menu. All right, so now what we mostly do as architects, all right, what we mostly do is we always go into the metric architectural template. All right, in any time we are designing something, we just go into the metric architectural template. Yeah, that's right, because we are using the metric system of measurement, and we need an architectural template because we are designing an architectural building, so we definitely need an architectural template. All right, so now what if you're an electrical engineer, or if you're a services engineer, if you're a structural engineer? Of course, we have the metric structural template here. And what if you're a plumber and you'd want to design or draw your layouts for your for any kind of projects that you want in there? All right, so Revit has all of those templates in there. All right, but you are just not going to see them here, since in here you're going to have the standard, just the metric architectural template and the metric structural template and construction template. And in this video you're going to be using the default metric template. All right, so I'm going to be using the default metric template. You are not seeing that in here, but Revit has that inside of the software, right? It's installed in there. So what you would want to do is you'd want to head straight into the browse tab in here. Just click on the browse tab, and let me go a few folders back so you guys can see how I got in here. All right, so this is perfect. So I just came into the templates tab and I went into the English tab right there, and you're going to notice we have all of these templates in there. All right, so you were not being able to see all of these templates in there. All right, what we were only seeing is the metric architectural template as usual, the construction and the structural and the imperial of all of those templates in there. All right, so now in here you notice we have the electrical default metric, the electrical default GBRU, which is just the abbreviation for the British standard. So that's one thing you would also need to know. So if you are designing a building or an electrical design for maybe a project you are working on, you need to know the standard in which your country actually works with. All right, so in Ghana, in Accra here, we work with the British standard. So if I was designing a plumbing, if I was doing a plumbing design in there or a plumbing layout, I'll have to go for the plumbing default GBRENU. All right, so that's my standard in there. So it means that it's going to give me the standard of that country, which is also required in my country. All right, so that is just what it means. So you need to make sure you have the right template. All right, you choosing the right templates gives you 20% head start. All right, because you're going to have a lot of stuff that in there that you would not now have to go and do a lot of work around. All right, so you need to make sure you select the right template anytime you're working inside of the Revit software. It's very, very important. So in this video, I'm going to be using, like I said, the default metric template, all right, which is this template right here. So I'm going to make sure I select that default metric template in there, and I'm going to click on open, and I'm going to click on open in there, and perfect. It's going to take a while, and it's opened in here. So now I have that default metric template opened in here, and the first thing you want to do now is, guys, you need to make sure you save your project. All right, so just hit on Ctrl S on your keyboard, and we need to make sure we save that. I think I have a folder on my desktop, concrete. I'm going to save that in there, and I'm going to call this concrete structures, just like the title of the series, concrete structures in there. And this is perfect, and I'm going to head into options in there. Now you're going to notice sometimes when you save your file in Revit, it tends to create a whole lot of backup files in there. All right, sometimes it gets very irritating because the files tend to take a lot of space in there, and sometimes it comes in very helpful. Maybe if you're working and you didn't save, you have a little bit of backups in there that you can actually go in and select. But with this time, I think I'll be saving every second in the way, so I'm just going to need one in there. I just want just one backup file, so I'm just going to click on OK in there, and I'm going to save this file, and it's going to take a second, and it's saved in there. So this is perfect. Now we need to start off with our project, but first of all we need to set up our project. All right, so we've just selected the right template, and we need to set up our project in there. So what we are going to do now is we are going to head into any of the elevation views. I'm going to go into the east elevation, and I have level 1 in there and level 2 in there. All right, so I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call this ground level. All right, so let's just call this ground level, and I'm going to leave this here, and I'm going to call this my ground floor. So I'm actually going to design or create a model that we are going to use in this series for the purpose of this tutorial. All right, so I'm going to call this ground floor. You can follow along with every step in the way in there, and I'm going to change this. Okay, so what I can do is I can call this my first floor if I want. Okay, let me just change this to 600. Let me change this to 600 in there, and I'm going to lift this up a little bit in there to just kind of like create a very neat work in there. So I have my ground level at 0 and my ground floor plan in there. So we need to set up more levels in there, and what you can do is you can head straight into the architecture tab. Just make sure you're in the architecture tab, and then just click on that level icon right there, and I'm going to leave this about 3,500 is fine, and I'm going to pull this in here. The moment you see that hyphenated line in there, it means it's pretty much set up in there. So you can just click in there, and I'm going to change the name for this. I'm going to call this my first floor. I'm going to call this first floor, and I'm going to set up more levels, just 3,500 in there. The moment you see those hyphenated line, you can click in there, and it's going to lock in place that level line in there. So I'm going to call this my second floor. Oops, second floor in there, and this is perfect. And I'm going to create the last floor, which is going to be the roof. All right, so I'm going to create one more in there, and I'm going to call this my roof level. All right, so I'm just going to call this roof level, and just hit on anywhere on the space on your working space in there, and this is perfect. So now we've had our levels set up. Let me just measure through in there, and we need to create one more level. So just escape out of there, make sure you're in the architecture tab, and just click on that level head in there. I'd wanted us to create a very shallow foundation, but I'm going to keep this at 1.8, and I'm going to log this in here. All right, so this is perfect, and we are going to call this our foundation. Let me just call this the foundation plan. Alright, so this is perfect, and we have that foundation plan in there. This is perfect. Alright, so this is what we want to achieve now. So this is perfect. So now if we head into any of the elevation views, you're going to notice we have all of this set up in there. When we head into the south, it's also being set up in there, and when we head into the west, it's also being set up in there. Alright, so I'm going to just remove all of these views in there, just remove all those views, and I'm going to head straight into level 1. in there. All right, so this is perfect. We are in level 1, and we are going to now set up our grids in there. So we are done with our levels. We need to set up our grids. So you need to make sure the same procedure. You need to make sure you are in the architecture tab, and under the datum in there, we are going to have our grid in there. So we are going to click on our grid line in there, and we are going to click right there and just extend this up a little bit, and this is perfect. All right, so we are going to create more grids in there, and just click right there. All right, so this is also perfect. Escape and just create more grids in there, or you can just select this, copy, and just put this grid somewhere in there. All right, so this is also another way you can actually do that, and we'll be placing 4 grids in there, but we need to make sure they are all at the right spacing. I want to leave each and every space in there at 4 meters. I want to leave each and every space in that 4 meters in there, so I'm going to call this 4 meters, and this is perfect. And cancel out of there and just click on this one, and we select in there, and then we just change this to 4000. Click anywhere in there, just make sure you select this because we want this to move. All right, then we come in here and then we change that dimension in there. We want to leave an interval of 4 meters in between all of those grid lines. All right, so now you kind of want this to center in between your elevation markers. All right, so just make sure you kind of move it a little bit. I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard. All right, so just kind of move it a little bit to the center. Just drop this down a little bit, move this up. All right, this is perfect. Just click anywhere in there, we are good to go. So now let's place in our horizontal grids in there. So just click on the grid line in there, and we can just move this somewhere around here. And before we continue, you're going to notice we have in here 1, 2, 3, 4, and our horizontal grid, we need to actually change the name in there. All right, the wording. So you can actually click in here, go into the properties panel and change that in there, or you can click in here and just click right in there, and then you can change this to an A. All right, so we've changed this to an A. We have this in there. I don't think I have to explain why we have to change the name. All right, but this time you guys should all know this by now. So the same thing, I'm going to leave about 4 meters. All right, so with this one, we are going to create just 3 grids. We're going to use just 3 grids, so we can do with 4, but this is just a simple tutorial, so I'm going to use just 3 grids, and we need to make sure the intervals are also at 4 meters in there. Right, so let's just check this out. Let's see if we are on track, and this is perfect. So we are at 4 meters everywhere, and we are good to go. So now you notice at the bottom in here, everything is kind of like locked in place in there with this grid. So if I should move this up a little bit, it's kind of like locked in place, which is perfect. So that's one interesting thing in there. You need to make sure everything is locked in place. And let me just move this to about the center of our elevation markers in there, and this is perfect. So now some of you guys might want your names of the grids. All right, the name of the grid, you'd want it to also appear at the bottom. All right, sometimes you don't want them to appear at the bottom. Revit is by default going to leave this on just one side. All right, what you can do is you can just make sure you click on this tick button in there, and just check that button, and you're going to have this in there. Or you can uncheck this button, and we are not going to have this on this side. All right, so now another way where you can make everything come in there is just select any of the grid, get into edit type, and with the plan view symbols with the end 1 default, we want to check that, hit on apply, hit on OK, and all of them are going to have this in there. Right, so this is for the end 1. You notice we checked this out on purpose. All right, everything on this side was for the end 1, so you just make sure you check this back, and we have our grids in there, which is perfect. So now we can start off with our building. Let's just make sure we have that 3D view in there. Let's just see what we have. So we have our level set up, which is perfect, and we are going to start off with our concrete structure. So let's get back into the level 1, and what we first of all need to do is we need to bring in our columns. All right, we need to now place in our columns, and what we have to do now is we need to make sure we get into the structure tab in there. And when you head into the structure tab, you notice in here under the structure we have column. All right, so if I should click on that column in there and just click on the drop down menu, you notice we have just one universal column in there. All right, this is a steel column, and I'm not going to use this column for this tutorial. It's a concrete structure we are actually modeling out, so I'm not going to use this in there. So that brings us to us being able to select the right template. All right, so so if you had selected a structural template in there, you're going to notice in there you would have some types of columns in there, unlike this default template I selected at the beginning. All right, so that's just one thing you need to know. So what we need to do now is we'll need to load in some concrete columns. All right, so I'm just going to go into the load family in there, and I'm in the imperial system, which I don't want. I want the metric system, so I'm going to go back a few folders back and just click on the English tab in there. And when we are done with the English tab in there, what we now need to do is, let me just change this to list view, and we need to get into the structural columns. All right, so just get into structural columns, and we get into concrete, and let me just get the view, and let's see what we have in there. So we have some types of columns in there. Let me see what this column is, and let me just click right here and click right here. Okay, so I'm going to load in this square column. All right, so just make sure you select this column and just click on open in there, and perfect. So Revit has loaded up that column in there for us. So we have our column in here, and with this column is set to 300 by 300 millimeters on each side. All right, it's a square. So what you can do is we can just escape out of there. Let's get back into the column, and let's get into the edit type. All right, so when we head into the edit type, we are going to be greeted with our type properties, obviously, and we have this set up at 300 millimeters on each side. All right, so I think this is perfect. So I'm going to be using the 300 by 300 in there, and I think I'm good to go. So let me just click on OK, and I'll need to place those columns on each of the points at the intersections of all of those grid lines you have in there. All right, so now when you pay attention to this sub panel in there, you're going to notice we have rotate after placement. All right, you need to make sure you check that, because maybe if you were using a column that is very horizontal, let's say it's 300 by 600, all right, sometimes when you place the columns in there, you would want to rotate it to a different direction. All right, so with this, it's a square, so if we rotate it, it wouldn't even make any sense, because it's still the same dimension on each and every sides in there. All right, so now we have the depth in here, which is going to tell us the depth, obviously, and we have height in there. And with the height, you can we just need to make sure we start from the foundation. Top constraints is invalid at the level. Let's click on cancel, and we are going to set this to start from let me just set this to height, depth in there, and it's going to start from the foundation plan in there, and it's going to move up 2500 in there. So I'm actually going to change that dimension and make it go up a little bit. So we have this column in here, and we have the room bounding, and we can actually create a slanted column also. So we can create a slanted column even on this plan view and also in the 3D view. So I'm not going to be talking about this. I'm going to be quick with everything I have to do in here in this single part. All right, so we are just going to place the vertical columns, and one very cool thing we can do is we can place it, we can make sure we select it at grids, and after selecting the grids, you just make sure you do a mass selection in there, and just finish that in there, and we have our column placed in there. All right, so if I should go into the 3D view, this is perfect. So now you notice we have those columns in there starting all the way from the foundation level, and we want those columns to move all the way up in there. All right, so I'm going to get into the foundation plan in there. So just get back into the foundation plan by heading straight into the plan views. We have this in here, and this is perfect. So we have our floor plan, our columns in there. All right, so I can actually select all of those columns. Now I would want to take these columns out. All right, so let me just select these columns, select all of these. Okay, so I'm going to leave these columns just as they are. I'm going to leave them just as they are, and I want those columns to move all the way to the top. All right, so I'd want them to move all the way to the top in there. So let me just get back into foundation, and I'd want them to go all the way up. All right, so I'm just going to make a broad selection of every single column in there. Select all instances visible in view, and with the top level I'm going to change this to I want them to go all the way to the roof level. All right, so this is perfect. Head into the 3D view, and we have our columns in there moving all the way to the roof level in there. All right, so just come back in here, and I'm going to delete some of my columns in there. I'm going to put a structural wall, so just delete all of this, and make sure you're in the structure tab. And when you head into the structure tab, you just click on that drop down menu below there, and you're going to notice in here we have structural wall. All right, so the difference between the structural wall and the architectural wall in terms of the difference between the structural wall and the architectural wall in terms of icon design is the structural wall is straight and the architectural wall is a little bit curved in there. All right, so I'm going to use the structural wall, select that structural wall in there, and I'm going to go into my edit type. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this 300 millimeters concrete in there. And you can just go in here and make sure you specify that. All right, so I'm just going to change the width to about 300, and this is fine by me. And you can make sure you specify the material if you want. So I'm just going to click on OK in there, and I'm going to draw out that wall in this space right here. All right, so I'm just going to click in here on this part, and I'm just going to draw this wall. All right, I'm currently on the ground level. Let me get back into the foundation and just click right here and just draw out that wall. All right, the base level is set to that in there, and this is perfect. So now let me get into the 3D view. Okay, so we should have watched that in there. All right, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete all of those walls, get back into the foundation plan, and we are going to create the same type of wall, the 300 millimeters in there. And we need to make sure this is set to height unconnected, and we have this, we want this to go all the way to the roof level from the foundation plan, which is the base constraint. We want to start from the foundation plan, and we want it to go all the way to the top constraint, which is the roof level. All right, so this is perfect for us, and we're going to click in there, and we are going to start off by drawing this just right in this space in there. Now you're going to notice we have all of this log signs in there, the constraints log signs showing in there, and you're going to want to check all of those in there. All right, so just make sure you just lock all of those in there, the sense being that when we move this column, it's also going to move with it as well. Right, so just Ctrl Z on your keyboard to bring this back. Let's head back into our 3D view, and we have that structural wall in there with our structural columns also in there as well. All right, so we are getting somewhere, guys. So we have this in there with the columns and also the structural wall, and we are good to go. And we now need to create our floor slabs. All right, so let me just get back into the foundation. I'm not going to do that at the foundation level. I'm going to do that at the ground level. All right, so I'm going to do that on the ground floor. All right, so I'm going to do the floor slabs on the ground floor. All right, so we need to also do the same for the floor. So just click on that down menu in there, and just click on the structural floors in there. All right, so with the structural floor, slabs, I'm going to keep this at 150. I think I'm fine with this. Let me just duplicate this and call this the 150 concrete structure. All right, let me just call this concrete. Yeah, yes, 150 concrete. All right, so let me just click on OK in there, and it's set to 150 with the entire thickness, and just click on OK in there, and we can now start to draw out our floor slabs in there. All right, so just as you've been drawing all of those architectural floor slabs, you can also do the same in there and just draw that floor slabs in there. So I'm going to use the pick line tool, and I'm just going to pick a line in there and just use this to pick this line, and I'd want it to go all through that structural wall in there. So just pick this line as well, and this is perfect. All right, so we have this in there, and I'm now going to use the trim and extend tool, TR on your keyboard in there, and just trim this to this, trim this to this, and just trim this to this, and also trim this to this. All right, so now we have this as our span direction. I want to leave this as it is with the span direction right in there. I think this is where it's supposed to be. So if you have it slanted vertically, you'd want to do that horizontally. All right, so I'm going to leave my span direction just as it is and just finish this floor slab in there. Head into the 3D view and we have this in here. All right, so we have this created in there, our structural floor slab in there. And let me just use this join tool to actually join this. All right, so let me get back into modify and join geometries in there and join it with the slab. Just make sure you join it with that slab in there. All right, so just click on the slab and join it with this, and just make sure you click on the slab and also join it with this as well. All right, so this is perfect. So we have this in here which is serving as our slab in there, and this is perfect. All right, so we are getting somewhere, guys. So in the next part we'll be looking at the rebar structure. So in this part it's just going to be a simple concrete structure where we'll be modeling out and we'll be actually doing our foundations and all of that in there. All right, so now we would have to place in some structural walls, and we also have to do it for the beams as well. So what you can do is you can just select this floor slab, you can hit on copy and go down in here into paste and align to selected levels, and you'd want to align that to the first and the second. All right, and I want that to also go to the roof level. All right, so just click on OK in there and perfect. So we have this moving all the way to the roof. I think I'm going to delete. Okay, so let me just leave the roof as it is in there, and this is fine. So I'm going to use this space as an elevator in there, so I'll need to create a shaft in there. So what I can do is I can head into level any of the levels, just the ground level, just get back into architecture in there, and what you need to do is you need to head in here to shaft, and we can create a shaft in there. All right, so we can just create that shaft, and with the base offset unconnected is set to 150. I think it's fine by me. I'm going to head into the 3D view and I'm going to lift this up a little bit in there. All right, and I'm going to bring this down in there. All right, so we've created that shaft in there. All right, so we have that hole in there, so that floor slab doesn't look like it's covering through in every space. All right, so you can same thing do what we did for in there. You can just click on your join tool, just click on that slab, join it with this, click on this slab, join it with this wall, and let me just steal this on the other side, click and join it with this. So you can click in here, join it in there, click in here and join it in here, and you can click in here and also join it in here as well. With the back, I don't think we have a problem in there, and this is perfect. So we have this in here. I remember way back in when we were in school, we actually studied solid structures, skeletal structures in there, the types of structures we have: solid, skeletal, and I think there was one more, I think I've forgotten about that. And yes, so we are kind of creating like a solid structure. This is coming off more like a skeletal structure in there. All right, so we'll need to place our walls in there. All right, so we need to place in some structural walls in there, and also then we need to place in the beams, and then we come and deal with our foundation also in there as well. All right, so let's start off with the same thing. It's just going to be the same thing. All right, so just get back into ground floor, and with placing that in there, what's happening in here? Yes, so that's the span direction of our structural slab in there. All right, so okay, this is perfect. And so with the walls, it's pretty much the same thing. You need to go back into the structure in there and get back in here, and we click on that structural wall, and we have that 300mm wall in there. So you can click in here and just run it through and join it with every single space you have in there. All right, so with this, it's set to torque constraint, which is the first floor. Let me head into the 3D view, and you notice we have this wall moving all the way in there. All right, so sometimes you would want to, let me just click in here and bring this down a little bit, so we can click in place to lock this in, which you do not want to do that. So sometimes we would want to actually create our beams. All right, we would want our beams to walk through in there and would attach this to that beam in there. All right, so that is what we want to do. So I think this is fine. I'm going to leave it at this level, just at this level. Let me just get into any of the elevation, probably the north, and let me just measure what I have in here. All right, so just click right here and perfect. So I'm going to leave this, just click on that wall, and I'm going to leave this to about 200mm in there. All right, so we have this going up at 4 meters. All right, so with the top offset, we are going to leave this at negative, and let me do this negative 300 in there, and let's see what we have. All right, so we have 150. Okay, so let me do it the negative 600 because of our slab in there. Oops, let's just go back, select that, and let's change this to 600, and we have this at 450. Okay, 450 is fine. I'm going to delete that dimension in there. Just select this, and let me see what I can do. We have our top constraint in there, and let me just measure what I have in here from this level. Oh, okay, so we have 3,350, and we have this at 350, and we have this going at 350 as well. All right, so this is perfect. And so we've already eaten into this dimension, which is the 150 for the floor slab in there. All right, we've eaten into that dimension in there, so we need to now place in our let's say 150, so we can do like a beam which is going to extend about 350 downwards in there. All right, so now let's just start off by placing in our beams. So I'm going to go back in here to our ground floor, and we are going to start placing in our beams. So just make sure you are in the structure tab in there, and I guess by now you guys have followed through with every step in the way. If you have any questions, you can drop it in the comment sections, and I'm going to do well to respond to each and every one of you guys. So just make sure you drop every single comments in the comments section right there. All right, so you can drop those comments, and I'll do well to respond to each and every one of you guys out there. All right, so we are going to place in our beam, so you need to make sure you're in the structure tab as well, and we have in here beam. All right, so we just need to click on that icon, and we are going to be greeted with this universal beam. It's a steel beam, and we definitely do not want to use this beam. All right, we want to use a concrete beam in there. All right, so what we want to do now is we need to load in, like we usually do, we need to load in a concrete beam in there. So what we can do is we can go into the load family in here, or we can hit on escape, go into insert, and load that in there. So since this is here already, we are going to use this. All right, so just load family, and you remember we came in here for the concrete columns. I just want to go back a few folders. Let's go back in there, and I'm going to change this to not thumbnail. I'm going to leave this at list, and let's just see what we have in here. So we have structural retaining walls. Nope, we don't want that. Framing, we don't want that. Foundation connections, rebar shapes, and structural chassis. Let's just get into the structural framing, and we have concrete in here. Let's see what they have, and let's see what they have. All right, so this is perfect. We have our beam in here. All right, so we are going to be using this beam in here, this concrete beam. All right, this concrete beam. So just click on that, and then we just load this in there, and perfect. All right, so we have this beam in here, and we can get into edit type. And when we head into edit type, I'm going to first of all duplicate. All right, so the thickness of this beam is going to be 300. All right, we are going to leave this at 300, and the height is not going to be 800. All right, the thickness is going to be 300, and the height, we are going to do the height at also 350. All right, we are going to do the height 350 in there. All right, so we have this in here with the base and the height. All right, so let's just change this. Let's see what they do. So let's just do this 350, and let's change this. Let's make this 300 as the thickness. All right, okay, this is perfect, and let's hit on OK, and let's start. All right, before we start placement, we need to make sure we're on the right level 1, and with the structural usage, it's automatic, and we also have this set to 3D snapping. All right, so if we're in the 3D view, we can actually create those beams still. So I'm going to start off in here from here, and I'm going to end here. All right, so now we have our beam in there, but you definitely can see it right in there. So let me head into the 3D view, and let's see where that beam is. All right, so we can't see the beam in here, and we have that beam placed in there. All right, but you definitely can see that beam. So what you can do now is, so what I learned from background architect, and what we can do now is we can just make sure we select this and we change our level of detail to let's change this to, it's still going to be hidden line, and just make sure you save your project. And let's just change the level of detail to fine, and let's head into the 3D view. Let's also change this to fine, and let's see if it's going to be displayed in there. All right, so we have the beam in here, we have that beam in here. This is perfect. So we have the beam in here showing at level 1. All right, so this is the beam in here. This is perfect. So we have that beam in here, and let me just change this to wireframe. Let me see, and this is it. All right, so we have that beam in here. All right, so this is perfect. Let's bring this back to wireframe, and I'm just going to measure and see what we have in here. All right, so let me just get into the north elevation, and I'm going to use my measure tool and just measure the thickness I have in here. All right, so I'll measure the entire thickness from here. It's 350. All right, so this is perfect. Just hit on delete on your keyboard, and we have 200, so we have 150 gone inside of that floor slab in there. So what you can do is you can select it, and with the start level offset, we can actually set this up to have negative 150, and we move this in there, and the start level has that 150 offset in there. And with the end level, we also need to do the same thing, negative 150, and it also does the same thing in here. All right, so we have our beam in there. If I should go into the 3D view, so now we have that 300 by 350 in there, which is perfect. All right, so we have this beam here, and we want to repeat the same kind of beam going all the way to other levels. All right, so it's simple. Just select it and align to the selected places, and we want it to go to first floor, second floor, and the roof level as well. So just hit on OK, and it goes all the way up in there. This is perfect, and we can now snap this wall to that beam in there, and just make sure we snap it in there. So this is perfect. So we have our structural wall snapping to that beam, which is just perfect, just as we want. So now you would want to also do the same thing, and you would want to also go through the same procedure by creating the beams on this side as well. All right, so you would want to do that on that side as well in there. And I'm going to skip that because I don't want to make this video very long. It's going to take a lot of time if I should do all of this in there, and I'm going to move straight ahead into the foundation plan. All right, so we are going to start off with the foundation plan and how you can actually create or design your own foundation plan inside of the Revit software. All right, so we are going to start off, and what we want to do is we need to make sure we are in the foundation plan, obviously, and we are currently in that foundation plan. All right, so this is set up, and we'd want to create now our column parts before we bring in the footings. All right, so what we want to do now is we need to bring all of those in there. All right, so what we can do now is we need to make sure we select this in there. So you can just select this in there, and you notice it says we don't have that family loaded up in there. All right, so we need to load up those families also in here as well. So I'm just going to click on yes in there, and I'm just going to go back a few folders as well. Just go back, and I'm going to change this to the list view, and I have this in here. All right, so this is perfect. I'm going to start off with a structural foundation, and let me just change this to thumbnail. All right, so this is perfect, and we are going to load this square one. This is a rectangular one. So I'm going to go for the simple footing rectangle. All right, so I'm just going to click on that in there, and I'm going to load this up into the software. All right, so we have this loaded up in here, and I'm going to get into edit type, and we are going to start off in there. All right, so with the foundation thickness, I would want to set that up to 350. All right, we can still do that 150, 450 in there. We can still do that 450, and with the width in there, you notice anytime I bring the mouse pointer in there, it's going to like bring a simple 3D view in there for us. All right, so with the width is set to 1200, and this is also set up to 1300. All right, so I'm going to make the length, set up all the way up to 900, because I kind of want to leave the same width of my wall. I would want to leave the same width of my wall on those other sides as well. All right, so with the columns in there, I'm going to want to do that, and I'm going to do this. Let me just get this up. All right, so this is perfect. So with the width, I'm going to want to leave that at 1.2 meters, and also with the length, I'm also going to do the same 1.2 meters for now. All right, so I can actually change that at any point in time when I feel like, and this is perfect. So I'm going to duplicate this, and you need to make sure you make the name match with that so you don't get confused. All right, so this is perfect. I'm going to hit on OK, and I have this in here. All right, so this is perfect. So now what you can do is you can select this at columns, and you need to make a mass selection of all your columns, and then you finish this in there. It's placed in there. So if you head into the 3D view, you're going to notice we have all of this placed in there. All right, so we have all of those footings in there. Let me just tilt this to the side in there, and we have all of those in there. All right, so we have all of those footings placed in there for those columns. All right, and we'll need to connect all of them together by creating a footing also in there, connecting all of them together. All right, so we'd have to do that for that as well. And let me just see what I have. So if I have 300, 300, 300, and we need to connect all of those as well. So let me just start by clicking in here with the wall one, and just select that, and you notice in here we have two types loaded in. We have the retaining footing and 900 by 300. All right, so I'm going to click in here, get into edit type, and duplicate that in there. All right, so just make sure you duplicate that, and with the width, we want that to be obviously 900, and with the thickness 300. Okay, I'm fine with this. I'm going to head back into the foundation plan, select, and we can just select multiple, all of those walls, and then we just finish that. Head into the 3D view, and we have this in here. Right, so let me head back into the foundation plan and just change this to fine, and change this to wireframe, still that. And what I'd want to do now is I'd want to set up my view range options in there, and with this I'd want to change this to unlimited, hit on apply, hit on OK in there. All right, so this is perfect. I have this changed now, so I can now see what is happening below in there. All right, so I have all of those parts also placed in there. All right, so this is all set up. So in the foundation plan we have this in there, and let me just get back into the 3D view. Just make sure, escape out of there, select this, and we have this in here. All right, we have this thing which is eating up. Okay guys, so we have our shaft in there which is kind of like eating up that space. All right, so we wouldn't be able to see that. So let's get back into the foundation plan, and let's see what we have. All right, this is perfect. Let's head into edit type, and we need to make sure do not break at ends. All right, so just click on OK, and this is perfect. All right, so we have all of this placed in there for us, which is perfect, and we would want to connect all of this with beams. All right, so what we can do now is we need to make sure we just click on our beam tab in there. We just need to make sure we click on our beam tab. All right, where is our beam? Just click on your beam and just get into edit type, and let's just duplicate this in there. All right, I'm going to call this concrete MC. All right, so just duplicate that in there, and with the height, with the base, with the width, I'd want the width to be at 900. I want the width to be at 900, and with the thickness, I'm going to leave this at still 300 in there, and just connect all of those. All right, so just kind of draw this to connect with this in there. Oh, okay guys, so you notice we have this done very thick in there. Let me just see what the entire width. I need to make sure we have the same 300 on the side. Okay, so this is too much. Let me just click on this and let me just make this 600. All right, so 600 would do the magic for us. So just 600, hit on apply, and okay. All right, so this is perfect, and this is what we have in there. So now we need to make sure we draw those out as well. Join all of these and just make sure we join all of these together, and we can join this to this, and we can also join this to this as well, and we can also join this to this and move this also somewhere here, and we can join this to this and move this also here. All right, so this is perfect. We've connected everything up, and there we go. So we have a perfect foundation plan for us. And if I should go into the 3D view, you're going to notice we have all of these also in there. All right, so we have that foundation in there with the thickness. I think I'd have to check my thickness in there and make sure it matches with the beam as well. All right, so it's 450, so I can click on this and get into edit type, and with this I can still change this to 450, and it's also going to apply that to all of this. So with this as well, I can go in here and then change the foundation thickness to also 450 and hit on apply, hit on OK, and this is perfect. So we have that also in there, which is also connected to that for this structure we have in there. So this is how you can actually create a foundation plan for your concrete structure in there. All right, so this is what we have in here, and we are going to end here, and we're going to continue in the next part where we'll be looking at the rebar structures inside of the Revit software. So I hope you guys have liked and subscribed to my channel. It's going to help me out a lot. I love you guys, and make sure you practice with every step in the way. I'll catch you guys in the next part. Peace out.
I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.